Hey, what's up everyone? It's Duncan from overlandjournals.com and welcome to part 6 of my series Overlanding for Beginners. And today I'm going to talk about trip planning. In case you missed the previous parts to this beginner series, go check that out. I'll leave the link above and in the description below to the playlist. If you're new to my channel, please do subscribe. I love sharing my experiences in overlanding with the wider community. So please do subscribe. I need to mention I don't claim to be an expert. In fact, I'm learning as I go along as well. But what I do love doing is sharing with you the years of experience in overlanding, off-roading that I have. Now, what I love doing is off-road touring. I don't do serious, like rock climbing and that sort of thing, but touring is something I love doing. So now to today's video. What I'm going to share with you in this video is my thought process when it comes to trip planning and how I go about doing this. Now, what I try to do is, whether it's a 2-day or a short trip or a longer trip, extended trip where I go really remote, I try to set a theme to my travels. And when I say a theme is, for me, it's just more than going out there and having a super awesome time, which we all want to do, and I certainly do too. But I'd like to have it at a part of a bigger picture of something that I'm trying to experience. And so that's the thought process I have. So I always set a theme. Now you may wonder, what exactly am I talking about when I'm talking about a theme? Well, I'll give you a couple of examples. Mid last year, one of the long extended trips, I think it was about 14 days, I'll leave a link above and in the description to that playlist, was here in South Australia. We've got what's known as the Unadata track or the old Garn route. Now the Garn used to be a railway line that existed from the late 1800s till about 1980. So it doesn't exist anymore, but the remnants of the track and all the historical locations along the track still exist, or at least most of it. And to me, one of the things I want to do is do the entire stretch of the old Garn route. Now, last year when I did that trip, I couldn't do the entire route because of time factors and costs and so on. So I've broken it up into 3 parts. And what I did last year was the first part of it. And hopefully the remaining 2 parts I'll do between now and next year. So that's one of my themes, is following the Garn route, stopping along the way, learning the history, meeting some of the locals, locals who might know or learned from their parents or grandparents about what the route was all like at that time and historical locations. So that's one theme. So another example is the recent Murray Mouth camping trip that I did, and the video link again above and in the description. Go check it out. It was a super awesome time we had. And that's also part of a bigger theme that I'm trying to do over a period of time. The Murray River is the longest river in Australia, and it empties into the ocean here in South Australia, and it starts in the Australian Alps, which is in the state of Victoria. So our first trip was just a 2-day trip, and we camped at the mouth where the river empties into the ocean. Go check out the trip video as well. I talk a little bit more details about the trip, link above again and in the description. But over a period of time, what I also want to do is trace the river back to the Alps. So I'm going to break it up depending on time available, and so over maybe another year or 2, I want to trace the River Murray to all the way up to the Australian Alps. And it'll also give me an opportunity, when I get to the Australian Alps, I get to do a bit of snow driving, which I've never done before, and enjoy everything along the way. So by having a theme, it sort of gets me to plan, and also not just to get to that end point, but also break it down and enjoy every point along the way, and enjoy the amazing landscapes and everything else, historical points, meet the locals and so on. So getting a theme to me helps me to put it all together and achieve it stage by stage. So once I've set my theme, I've also broken it down to the stages. I'm going to try and do the trip in. Then what I do is I take each stage and I plan that stage, and I break it down further so that I kind of work out along the route, what am I going to see, where am I going to stop, and even other little details. It may not interest each and every one of us, but I like sort of getting to know the local wildlife, flora and fauna. I'm not huge into these things. I am huge into wildlife, but flora and fauna I'm not a huge fan. That's just me, but I still like to get to know it. It adds more interest to what I'm learning as I travel on these trips. And also like the histories along the way. Now here in Australia we have the Aboriginal history, as well as we've got the early settler history, and these are also nice things to learn, and it kind of gives me that appreciation for what the early settlers and the indigenous population of this country did towards what we get to enjoy today. So I break it all down and I make a list of all these things that I want to see and visit and experience and so on. So that becomes part of my trip planning as I've broken it down into my stages. So I try and incorporate as much little details into my trips as I possibly can. And another example is historical pubs. I love going to pubs, especially the historical ones. And in the outback here in Australia, we get what I call outback pubs, and they all come with a strong history behind them. And they give so much character as you walk into these places. So what I try and do is when I do my trip planning, and if there is one of these historical pubs along the route, or even if it's slightly out of the route, I try and incorporate it. And that's a list of 50 odd pubs that I'm trying to cover or as I travel. So I add a lot of these interesting elements into my trip planning so that I get as maximum enjoyment out of my trips. Now you might wonder, where in the world do I get the time to do all this? Well, I wish I had all the time in the world and I could travel all the time without, but we all have to work for a living. So time is a challenge. But I always believe if we have a plan, we can make it work. So what I do is at the beginning of each year, or leading up towards the start of a new year, I make a list of all the trips I'd like to do. And then I kind of slot that into sort of the leave days or leave periods I expect to have through that year. So and then I break it down further to short trips I could do, so like over a long weekend or a quick few days off from work. And then I also break it down to longer trips that I could do. So that way I get a balance of long trips as well as small trips. But they all fall within that framework of my theme or places I want to go. And something else I do is so at the beginning of the year, I make this list. I write it in big bold letter with a black marker. I write all the places that I would like to visit and approximately which time of the year I'd like to do them. And I stick it on the wall that's facing me in my workstation. And when I get to work every morning, that's what stares at me. Throughout the day, it's a constant reminder. That list is a constant reminder that these are the trips I have to do. And that kind of energizes me. So even if I'm having a crappy day at work and I'm just really not enjoying the day, looking at that list sort of keeps me going because I'm working towards it. So that's something I do to get myself motivated. Now traveling with others is always so much more fun, especially if you're traveling with like-minded people. But it's not easy. Not everyone can get time off the same time I can. So what I do is once I've got my list of trips for the year, or even beyond the year, what I then do is I tell my friends about it. And I also post on some of the forums, off-roading forums that I frequent. And I post it on these and I say, okay, this is my itinerary. These are the trips I'd like to do this year, or these are the trips I'd like to do over the next 2 years. If anyone's interested, get in touch with me. And a lot of the time it works and sometimes it doesn't. In my experience, it's a bit of a 50-50. So if there is anyone else who's interested in going, then we get together and I plan with them and I tell them exactly what I would like to do and how I'd like to travel. and if no one can make it, it's still fine. Or even if someone pulls out at the last minute for whatever good reason, it's still fine, because I've done my trip planning, and myself and my wife, we just take off. Then comes to the question of what do I take on this trip and how much of it do I take. So to try and figure that out, I do a bit of research. Now that I know the route, I do some research into, like facilities along the way. Can I get fuel? How far apart are each point that where I can get some supplies? How much food should I carry? How much water should I carry? Is it safe to replenish along the way? I mean, there might be water supplies, but might not be as that safe. So I get all these details figured out well in advance. And then also like things like space. Do I have to carry space? How bad is the terrain? And if there is a place I can phone in advance and get all this information and get sort of updates from locals along the way, could be a local pub or could be a local gas station or something, I do phone and get all this information, and that helps me to figure out exactly what to take and how much of it I should be taking. Also, with the help of that information, I also figure out, am I going to do entirely camping, or am I going to mix it up with camping and a bit of lodging? Now, for example, last year when I went over to Kuba Pidi, link above and in the description below. Kuba Pidi is a place where people live underground. That's because summer months can be extremely hot, so they live underground, and that's something we wanted to experience. So when we got to Kuba Pidi, I think we spent 3 days there. We decided we're not going to do any camping. We're going to stay in an underground lodge, so get that authentic experience. And then also the information helps me to figure out how much of communication should I take. Now, in my previous video last Thursday, where I talked about communications, I talked about there's various different types of communications you can carry with us. But do I have, at this point I can ask the question, do I need to carry all this communication equipment that I have with me, or can I get away with only a bit of it? So that again, the information at this point is very useful. So this is what I say, what do I take and how much of it should I take? Now, another crucial part of your trip planning should be your vehicle. Something I do is about 2 to 3 weeks before each trip, I go through the vehicle myself. I have limited knowledge, but within that knowledge level that I've got, I check everything that I can. The more I get to know my vehicle, the more I know it intimately, so I check it. And then I also take it across to the person who does the maintenance on my vehicles, and I get him to go through it as well. Even if the vehicle is not due for a service, and if there's nothing that really concerns me, I still get him to go through it. I also share with him where I'm going, how long I'll be gone for, what kind of terrain I expect to be traveling on, and that gives me gives him a better idea to as to what he should be checking in the vehicle. So for example, if it's going to be a track that's very punishing on the suspension, he'll pay more attention to my vehicle's suspension and things like that. And then also it'll prompt what kind of space I should be carrying. And also the person who looks after my vehicles could also advise me, try and take this piece of spare, you might need it, and so on. And something else I do is affect certain parts of the vehicle, mechanically speaking, and I don't have much knowledge. What I do is I spend a couple hours with my friend at his workshop, and I get him to show me how to fix that if something did go wrong. Hopefully not. Also, be well aware of the limitations of your vehicle, in terms of what kind of terrain can it go on and can it not go on, how much it can carry. There's always a limitation to every single vehicle, so be well aware of it. And in fact, the capabilities of your vehicle should be right at the top when you're doing your early planning. So your trip planning is actually based around your vehicle. So make sure you take those things into consideration, and last thing you want is to get out there and because you didn't consider certain factors about your vehicle's limits, you have a breakdown, and you don't want that. Now to something you must do, and I highly recommend this. From the time you're planning your trips, get your family involved, especially your kids. And give them tasks to do. Break up the whole planning process. Don't try and do everything yourself. break it up, share it amongst your family and get them to do stuff. And like research, get your kids involved in the research process, and then talk to them about all the information they've gathered. Something I do is when I've done a trip and I'm doing a trip planning, okay, we don't have kids, so I just talk this over with my wife, and I talk about things that we should be seeing along the way, and all the interesting facts about the route and the historical features and facts and so on, and this gets us all excited. And I'll share with you one of my friends, he's got 2 children, son and daughter between the ages of 7 and 10, and what he does is when he does a trip, he gets them involved. And one trip we were lucky enough to do with them, and I was so amazed. These kids were so hyped up and excited about this trip. And in that 6-day trip, not once did I see these kids on an iPad or on a phone. They were more engaged with the environment, and not once did they say, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet?" No, they were so involved in it. So get your family involved, and you'd be amazed how much of an experience it's going to be, not just for you, but for your whole family. So I hope you enjoyed that video. Please do give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed already, please do subscribe. And if you've got any questions or if you've got any comments, leave them in the comments below. I'd really love to hear from all of you. And I'll see you next Thursday when I talk costing and budgeting. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.